Setting up the first lab in the disused paint shed of St John of God Hospital came about because Fiona, my patient, Fiona Elsey, had a vision for setting up cancer research here in Ballarat, and that was her dying wish that I would set that up. At that time, I was commuting to Melbourne as head of cancer research at the Children's Hospital and also looking after her as a patient of mine. And near the end of her life, when her cancer had progressed, she had a rare cancer called Ewing sarcoma. At the end of her life, she had a few sessions with me, and one of the things she said is that I think you should set up a cancer research here in Ballarat.
I think the main reason Fiona was inspired by research was from her own experience, because she was so gravely ill, and the improvements she made early on with her treatment triggered an interest in her to how and why that happened. And they invited Fiona and I to have a look at the lab where Fiona went to the large, and she actually saw a Ewing cell under a microscope, and it really triggered all her thought processes. And then she thought, well, why not Ballarat? We could fundraise at home and support the seeker, which was in Melbourne, and they were actually doing research at the lab there on Ewing sarcoma, which is what Fiona had.
She had a lot of insight at that stage, even though she was dying. Her mother, Gail, was in the room when I promised her I would set it up, and her father, Greg. Ever since that time, whenever I bumped into Gail said, you remember the promise you gave Fiona that you're going to set up a research lab, and Professor James is the Vice Chancellor. Why don't we set up a way of how to do it? And so Professor David James set up a meeting with St John of God Hospital at that stage, because there was no biological research going on in Ballarat at that time.
The whole community came on board, and Fiona, with her little chuckle and happy-go-lucky personality and smile, everybody loved her and everybody wanted to help her. So that's how it all began. That was the actual beginning. Fiona has such faith in George, and she knew that he would do anything to try and save her. And she knew that from the bottom of her heart, because even when Fiona was dying, she wanted us to thank George for what he did for her. So in the face of her death, she wanted us to make sure that he knew that she was grateful that he tried.
And it's not his fault she died.
30 years ago, I made a promise to a 14-year-old girl who was dying with metastatic Ewing sarcoma, and that promise, as I'm pleased to say, that her vision of what was going to happen was true, that we've been able to have an internationally recognised cancer research institute here doing cutting-edge research in the area of immunology and cancer. And she had great hopes that this institute would help us treat patients much better in the future.
Fiona's story was real. She had cancer, and there was something to tell. So I think the community listened because Fiona wanted things to change. And I think that's where it began, because in Ballarat there was nothing. If people had cancer, there was nowhere to go.
The community has helped us right from the beginning. Without their support, we would never been able to get that laboratory up and running. I'm pleased that 30 years down the road, it's coming up in October this year, I can put my hand on my heart